Today's date is June 14, 2026. We're having another simulation for the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation government. We are proposing a third government, independent government for the people of Palestine and Israel together, including the area of Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel. 15.5 million people will have one common secular government based on a constitution, based on equality, that would be independent and separate from the Palestinian and the Israeli governments. The federal government does not require the existence of the Israeli or the Palestinian government. It would be independent and separate from those governments, and it will function whether or not the Israeli or the Palestinian government will function in the future. It will be the only government that would obtain legitimacy from the people of Israel and Palestine. You can see our website at ipconfederation.org and read the Constitution. The Constitution of the federal government is in Hebrew, Arabic, and English. So if you click on Constitution, you will see the structure of the federal government with three branches: the legislative branch with 300 parliament members, the executive branch with a president and vice president, one Palestinian and one Israeli, and a judicial branch with Palestinians and Israelis, judges as equal in the judicial branch. The read of the Constitution is very interesting. I suggest you read it in order to get a better understanding of how this federal government will exist in conjunction with the Israeli and the Palestinian government. You could reach me at josephavasar@gmail.com. We have two guests today. The first, two guests together, but I'll introduce them separately. Harley Schlanger. Harley Schlanger is an American political analyst, writer, and speaker known for his work on international economics, diplomacy, and strategic affairs. Associated for decades with the Schiller Institute and the ideas of Lyndon LaRouche, he has lectured internationally on global finance, economic development, strategic security, and conflict resolution. Harley Schlanger has advocated development-based approaches to peace in Southwest Asia, including the OASIS Plan, which proposes regional cooperation through desalination, infrastructure, and economic development to benefit both Israelis and Palestinians. Avi Shilon. Avi Shilon is an Israeli historian, author, and political analyst specializing in modern Israeli history, political leadership, and ideological movements. Holding a PhD in political science from Bar-Ilan University, he has taught and conducted research at institutions including Columbia University and New York University. Avi Shilon is widely recognized for his biographies of Israeli leaders such as Menachem Begin and David Ben-Gurion, as well as his analysis of Israel's political evolution and internal debates. Our next speaker will be Jeff Halper. He will speak about the upcoming election in Israel, and the heading is, Will Israel Survive the Next Election? That will take place on June 28th of this year on a Sunday. In July 12th, we will have a simulation with Kishwer Bakar. He's a Pakistani writer, commentator, and educator. We are proposing a system of government for the people of Palestine and Israel. We are not dictating or not proposing what the policies of that government will be. We are demonstrating how a federal government that gives both the people of Palestine and Israel uh, will be based on constitution, how this government that gives the government of Israel and the government of Palestine a veto power will be able to thread the needle. What does it mean, thread the needle? It means that it will be able to pass legislation that both sides will accept, because if they do not accept, they will lose legitimacy within our own people. We're asking you to ask a lot of questions in these simulations, as many questions as possible. You can ask them outright by speaking or put them in the chat. Nasir will be administrating the chat comments and the chat questions and will relay them to us if you choose to ask using the chat feature. This is a short video that explains what the federal government that we are proposing is about. It's about 2.5 minutes long.
The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has endured for generations. And instead of time healing the wounds, it's only caused the anger to fester and the violence to grow. But what if there was a way to alleviate the tension? Something that may not outright solve every problem, but at least create a forum that encourages a peaceful compromise. Welcome to the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, a common third government between the Israeli and Palestinian citizens, specifically designed to foster peace, tolerance, and economic prosperity between the two nations. Here's how it works. First off, both Israel and Palestine will keep their respective governments. Israel's Knesset and the Palestinian National Authority will remain unchanged. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, IPC, will be a third entity acting as a unifying agent between the two. The IPC will comprise 300 parliament members elected from 300 districts in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Above them will preside a president and vice president, one Israeli and one Palestinian. In order for the IPC to pass a law, it will require a 55% majority from its Israeli representatives, as well as a 55% majority from its Palestinian representatives, thereby preventing either side from monopolizing the legislature. Of course, the IPC won't undermine the political power of either the Israeli or the Palestinian government. At any time, Israel or Palestine may veto a law passed by the IPC. If neither side vetoes, the law is passed. And the two nations are another step closer to resolution. Please help us make this a reality. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. We might speak different languages, but we all mean the same thing.
We have this video in Arabic and in Hebrew as well. Before we start the simulation, let's take a survey. Do you support a common confederation government in Israel-Palestine? We will compare this survey to another survey that we will conduct at the end of the simulation. Please, if you support a common federal government, please vote yes. If you do not know what it is, vote no. If you oppose it, vote no. Only if you are aware of what it is, vote yes. So I'll give you another few seconds to vote. Yes if you support, no if you don't know what it is, and no if you oppose. 5 more seconds to vote. Okay, could you please publish the votes? We have 14 out of 15 voted yes. That's 93%. And 1 voted no. That's 7%. All right, thank you. We are not following definitions. Confederation and federal systems exist worldwide to address specific conflicts, and their definitions vary and evolve. In the Israel-Palestine context, the IPC defines both federation and confederation in the same way as set out in its constitution, a shared democratic government for the Israelis and the Palestinians based on the principles outlined at ipconfederation.org. That's the website I showed you at the beginning. This is the heart of the simulation. We are asking the audience and our speakers to make these assumptions. From this point on, since this is a simulation, we are going to make certain assumptions. But before we make those assumptions, we need to discuss them. So the first assumption is that we were able to obtain sufficient funding to create a year-long campaign to promote the election. A year-long campaign to have Palestinians and Israelis register to vote and register to run for parliament and president. The registration will take place to vote 15 months. The election will take place 3 months. So this is the first assumption that you will have to make. And we are actually working on that as we speak, in reality. You'll have to assume that the election will take place online. People will be able to use their phone, will be able to use their computers, will be able to use friends' phones and friends' computers, and will have 3 months to vote. 15.5 million people will be given the opportunity to vote, will be given the right to vote, but children will not be able to vote. You'll have to assume that 5 million people have voted. You'll have to assume, for the purpose of this simulation, that 3 million Palestinians have voted and 2 million Israelis have voted. You will have to assume that the president received 2 million votes and the vice president received 1.5 million votes, and they will rotate. The president becomes vice president after 2 years, and the vice president becomes president after 2 years. For purposes of this simulation, in order to help me conduct the simulation, please assume that me, Joseph, was elected president. So that you know, I do not ever intend to run for president. I am not qualified to run for president. And in fact, since I am working on promoting the election, it would be a conflict of interest for me to actually run for either president or parliament. But for the purpose of this simulation, please assume that I was elected president. This is just for this simulation. You'll also have to assume that 300 parliament members were elected in 300 districts. Each district will elect one person. Some of the districts will be exclusively Palestinians population, some would be exclusively Israeli population, but many, many districts will be common districts. In other words, mixed district, Palestinians and Israelis together. Each district will have approximately 52,000 people. Before I go to Harley and Avi, does the audience, do you have any questions regarding these assumptions? Please ask now. If you have any questions or you want to express any doubts or whatever about the validity or the possibility that these assumptions could become a reality. Please ask now. Okay, I don't hear any questions. I don't see any in the chat. Let's go to Harley. Harley, do you have any comments or questions regarding these assumptions?
First, let me apologize for my voice. I had a fairly heavy cold the last couple of days, but I felt it was important to participate in this simulation. I have a couple of what might be considered technical questions having to do with budget, finance, how to resolve disagreements between the Confederation and the two governments. But I think those will probably come up in the discussion. Otherwise, I accept the assumptions that you've just laid out.
Do you have any questions relating to them?
No.
Okay. When you say you accept the assumptions, do you mean you accept the assumptions for the purpose of the simulation, or do you accept that those assumptions could turn into reality when we have the those issues being able to achieve those issues?
I'd say both, because if you have the election, we're going to have a situation where we'll have elected members, and in that sense, the assumptions will be real.
So you are of the opinion that these assumptions could be converted into reality.
Yes, under certain circumstances, and I think they could be, yes.
Okay, uh, what problems could you see in turning these assumptions into reality?
Well, the first one is getting enough people to vote. And you've covered that we would have a year in a sense, and there'd be funds adequate for it. But that's always the question. Because if you really think about it, for governments to function, they have to derive their powers from the governed. And that means that enough people would participate to ensure that those powers are legitimate. So I think the first question is how to make sure that enough people will know about it and will see it as a viable operation so they would support it, or at least take part in it.
And the second one,
Um,
if there is a second one, you said first, so I assume there is a second.
no, I don't have a second one right now.
Okay, I totally agree with you. I think that the first issue is awareness. And so I think if we are able to achieve awareness of this election, in other words, if we have 100% election awareness, these assumptions are realistic. The problem is not whether they'll vote, in my opinion. The problem is whether there is an awareness, whether we could create awareness. Let's go to Avi.
Hi, first of all, thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to take part in this important project. For me, and I'm waiting for our discussion, but the details are less important. What is important for me, and this is the thing that invigorated me to take part in it, is to be able to imagine the Israelis and the Palestinians as working together without looking at the conflict as a zero-sum game, while maintaining Israel as a Jewish state and Palestine as a Palestinian state. I think this can be a very, or maybe the only visible way to solve the conflict, because the two-state solution is mainly about separation. And one-state solution, I think it would be very difficult to achieve and maybe even unfair, because the Jews will prefer to have a Jewish state. So to have two states while connecting them with some kind of joint parliament or confederation could solve this problem of having two states while making it together. And actually, I think that according to the UN resolution of 1947, which decided or voted for two-state solution, actually, if we look at the detail of this resolution, it was something similar, because the Jewish state and the Arab state should have been connected economically, and with some apparatus to work together. And this is why I want to promote this idea of having two states and, as I said, alongside it, having a joint parliament of Israelis and Palestinians. So in the discussion, I would like to see how it can work in details. But in general, I can say that I supported this project in general, even without delving to the details.
What about the assumptions? Do you have
Uh,
any difficulty imagining those assumptions to be realistic? Or do you have any difficulty going on with this simulation, accepting the assumptions as a reality?
No, I think I can predict it as a reality. I think the assumptions are good. The main issue is to convince people, as I said, that you will remain an Israeli in a Jewish state or a Palestinian in a Palestinian independent state while having a joint parliament. So I think once we will be able to convince people that this is the right path, I don't see any substantial difficulties in this assumption. On the contrary.
All right, thank you. All right, so when we met, Avi and Harley, Harley, you agreed to act as the president of Palestine for this simulation, and Avi, you agreed to act as the prime minister of Israel, correct?
Yes.
Indeed.
Yeah, okay, good. So this is the area we are speaking about. I'm going to be asking the audience to act as parliament members. You will have to choose whether you are Israeli or Palestinian parliament members. You'll have to remain intellectually honest throughout the simulation as either Israeli or Palestinian parliament members, and you will have to decide what specific area you represent. Remember, you represent 52,000 people. So I'm showing you the map, and you'll choose what area in either Israel or Palestine you represent. And your areas could be exclusively Palestinian or exclusively Israeli or a mixed area. So please make your choice right now. Are you a Palestinian or Israeli parliament member? Please make a choice. Dan? Okay. So if you're a Palestinian parliament member, make your choice. If you're an Israeli parliament member, make a choice. Avi, you cannot make a choice. You are a separate government. You are the prime minister of Israel. Harley, you cannot make a choice. You are the president of Palestine. You are not going to be given a right to vote on legislation. You will only be given a veto power if the legislation violates your sovereignty. Okay.
Sure.
All right. So I'm going to give you 5 more seconds to decide whether you are a Palestinian or Israeli parliament member. Okay. Publish the vote. We have 8 Palestinian parliament members, and we have 5 Israeli parliament members. Stop sharing. And from now on, we are going to make the assumption that we are the government, and I am the president. You are the parliament members, and Avi is the prime minister of Israel, and Harley is the president of Palestine. Okay. So our first order of business is to ratify the Constitution. Again, Harley and Avi, you cannot ratify. You are in a separate government. But let's read. This is a short version of the Constitution. Libby, would you be so kind as to read out the Constitution?
I don't think Libby's here.
Okay. Nasir, you want to read it?
Sure. So the Constitution, Palestinians and Israelis are entitled to equal rights under the law and guaranteed human rights and freedom. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation does not intend to supersede or supplant the Palestinian or Israeli government, nor to abrogate or undermine any agreements between these governments. We recognize the need to work with the Israeli and Palestinian governments. Our purpose to resolve conflict and to expand the relations between Palestinians and Israelis in a fair and equal manner.
Equitable.
Equitable. We believe in equal rights under the law, guaranteed human rights, and freedom for all. We voluntarily give the legislatures and the governments of Israel and Palestine veto power over legislation we pass relating to the domain of control of those governments. We believe in the separation of power between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. We believe in the creation of a permanent secular government for all the people residing in Israel and Palestine. We believe in having a separate judicial branch relating to the IPC legislation with Israeli and Palestinian judges, with a system to avoid biased decisions based on nationality.
Okay, so we are assuming that the parliament was just elected and you are called to ratify the Constitution. The Constitution is basically stating that whatever the Israeli and the Palestinian governments agree between themselves, constitutionally, we are bound to accept those agreements, and we give them a veto power over legislation that violates their sovereignty. And the veto power is given to them. What is the veto power? Why are we giving them a veto power? We are giving a veto power to the government of Israel on issues in which it is indispensable, and the Palestinian government on issues that it is indispensable. That's how we define whether or not the legislation violates their sovereignty. We are the one who decide whether the legislation violates their sovereignty. In the event of changes in the entirety of the Israeli or Palestinian governments, any legislation that we pass could be amended or repealed subject to our Constitution. We are the one who decide whether the governments of Israel or Palestine is indispensable or dispensable with regard to any legislation. So, example of indispensable. If we pass legislation that have to do with the use of land or police force or removal of the wall, those issues will make the Israeli and the Palestinian government indispensable, and therefore they get a veto power. However, if we pass legislation regarding our own budget or on ratifying the Constitution or appointing our own ministers or allocating our funds, the Israeli and the Palestinian governments are dispensable, and therefore they do not get a veto power. Why do we give them a veto power on issues that they are indispensable? Because a veto power provides a safety net to both sides, to the governments and to the people of Israel and Palestine. It increases the likelihood that Israelis and Palestinians will participate in the election, participate in voting, and in becoming candidates. It decreases the Israeli and the Palestinian government's opposition because they don't really have a reason to oppose it, because we are not a subversive organization. We are not asking for the dismantlement of the existing governments. And it removes any claims that we are a subversive organization and gives legal protection to the candidates. It compels the IPC to thread the needle. In other words, to find at the least objectionable legislation, and it creates a platform for negotiation with a deadline. So before we pledge allegiance, the parliament members, does the parliament member, before I go to Avi and Harley, and before we pledge allegiance to the Constitution and before we accept the Constitution, do the parliament members have any questions regarding the Constitution?
Breaking. Bandits storm a Koji school.
Okay, I don't hear any questions. So, as the parliament, after we pledge allegiance and after we accept the Constitution, we will go to Harley and Avi, who will be commentators on what they have just seen. So since we have no questions by the Parliament members, all Parliament members now have to pledge allegiance to the Constitution and to uphold the Constitution. All Parliament members must do so. If you do not accept the Constitution or willing to pledge allegiance, you will be removed from the Parliament. So could you please ratify and pledge allegiance to the IPC Constitution? Remember, if you vote no, that means you are not accepting the Constitution. You will not be allowed to participate. You will not be able to vote because you are not accepting the Constitution. The person who received the second number of votes from your district will be chosen, will be taken your place. Okay, so you must vote yes in order to be part of the Parliament. Okay, publish the vote. 87% voted yes, ratifying and pledging allegiance to the Constitution. 2 voted no, so the 2 who voted no are removed from the Parliament, and the person, he or she who received the second number of votes from your district will be will take your place as Parliament member. Let's go to Harley and first, and then to Avi. Do you have any comments regarding what you have just seen about the Constitution?
Actually, I remember what my second question was from earlier, which has to do with the Constitution. What is the mechanism to overcome a veto? Especially in a security question or a budget question, is there a mechanism to overcome the veto?
No. If the Israeli or the Palestinian governments issue a veto, there is no mechanism to overcome the veto.
Does the president, do you then as president weigh in on that? Do you have any say in that?
Yeah, I have the power to put pressure on the Israeli and the Palestinian government, and I have the legitimacy to do so and the power to do so. But after negotiate, and we also have the power to amend the legislation. But
I was gonna say that in the past we've done where things have been vetoed and we changed the language and it became acceptable. So sometimes the veto is a way to send it back so that amendments and changes can be made so that it will be acceptable to those who vetoed it.
Is it not dependent on whether it is dispensable or non-dispensable?
Yeah, the legislation, each legislation states whether the legislation is giving a veto power to the Israeli or the Palestinian government. But once they are designated as indispensable, they have a veto power on that legislation. And if they veto the legislation, then there is no mechanism to overcome the legislation. There is a mechanism to negotiate another legislation.
I see that as an important question because I'm not certain that there can be a full agreement I assume that the Parliament will ratify treaties. And if there are peace treaties that may be unacceptable to one of the groups in the IPC Parliament, there should be a way that it can be at least discussed. And if you say it could be amended, then that would somewhat answer the question.
Could you explain? I don't quite understand what is the problem that you see. There are 2 different governments here, or actually 3. Within the legislation, itself, the president has the power to veto the legislation before it gets to the Israeli or the Palestinian governments. So I am the president, I can veto a legislation, but if I do not veto it and it is submitted to the Israeli and the Palestinian governments without my veto as president, then the Prime Minister of Israel, and actually the Parliament of Israel, the Prime Minister of Israel, the government of Israel, the President of Palestine, and the Parliament of Palestine have a veto power. So does that answer your question?
Well, the question is, would the treaties, peace treaties, for example, come under the auspices of parliamentary approval or disapproval?
That's a good question. If we enter, are you talking about whether when the parliament, the federal government enter into a treaty with another country, or are you talking about the separate governments entering into a treaty?
No, the Confederation. If the Confederation decided to have a treaty, for example, with Syria or any other country that was unacceptable to the two other existing governments, that was my consideration.
Okay, so if the treaty violates the sovereignty of either the government of Israel or the government of Palestine, then those governments have a veto power over it. If it doesn't violate, for example, I'm thinking it because you brought a question that has not been brought before. Let's say the federal government issues a passport, its own passport. And let's say the federal government, enter a treaty with the government of Syria to accept the federal government's passport as a valid passport. In my mind, that does not violate the sovereignty of the government of Israel or Palestine. And therefore, they will not be given a veto power over it because they cannot prevent us from flying to London from Tel Aviv and then to Damascus. Now, the Israeli government may say, well, since you flew to Damascus, you can't come back to Tel Aviv. But that would be a ball that you will have to play and will have to deal with it.
Okay. That's clear.
All right, let's go to Avi.
Yes, so my suggestion is that I'm waiting to hear, to see, to learn about the law that is being enacted, and then I will give you my take on it. I think
Okay.
let's start playing.
What about the Constitution? The Constitution, as we see it, is a momentous occasion in the history of Israel-Palestine. There has never been a constitution for a legitimate government in the entire area that separates between government and religion. In fact, there has never been a constitution in the history of humanity when it comes to Israel-Palestine. So you want to move into the subsequent legislation, but this is a momentous occasion in the history of humanity. Aren't you going to say something good about what we have just done?
Well, first of all, it's amazing. As long as I have the right to veto as the president of a Jewish state, I don't see any reasonable argument against having this constitution. But again, what is most important is that I will have my sovereignty, my independence, to reject or to accept any law or suggestion or an operation which was conducted by the joint parliament. So I can only see this historical development as something huge, great achievements that will not harm not the Israelis and not the Palestinians. So this is why I think that as long as my right to veto is maintained, I wholeheartedly support this historical development.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. All right. Let's go to the first legislation. Now that we are a parliament, we are passing the first legislation because of the issues that are going on right now. There is a continuous war. And Nasir, can you read the legislation?
Yeah, there's a person in the chat. I guess he doesn't speak English, and he's writing in Polish. If you want to type your message in Polish, I will translate it and pose a question to Kazmiri. Just for your information.
Are you
Yeah.
able to?
Yeah, I can translate it if he posts it. He's basically saying that his English is B2 level. I mean, you could attempt. We're pretty understandable people here. But if you want to type your message, go ahead and type your message in Polish, and I will have it translated. And I will go ahead and read this legislation: make peace with Iran, Lebanon, Yemen, and Syria. We, the elected members of Parliament of the Confederation Government of Israel, Palestine, affirm our responsibility to serve the people of this land with integrity, accountability, and unwavering commitment to peace. For more than a century, the people of Israel and Palestine and the broader Middle East have endured recurring cycles of war, violence, and instability. From Iran to Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and beyond, generations have suffered from the failure of governments and political actors to secure lasting peace. We believe that a new path is necessary. Accordingly, we are taking the initiative to safeguard all people living in the Israel, Palestine, and to advance a vision of regional stability that can extend across the Middle East. Peace for our people cannot remain an aspiration. It must become a deliberate and organized effort. To this end, we will establish official parliament delegations to engage directly with the authorities of Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iran. The purpose of these delegations is to open channels of dialogue, promote mutual de-escalation, and work toward binding commitments to cease violence and threats among all parties. Oh, is this continued? Oh. Our role will be to advocate firmly for an immediate cessation of hostilities and incitement, mutual recognition of the right of people in the region to live in security and dignity, structured negotiations aimed at achieving durable and verifiable peace. We will serve as an impartial facilitator and promoter of peace, guided by fairness, objectivity, and the protection of our people. Where governments or entities endanger regional stability or threaten civilian life, we will speak clearly and responsibly. Our commitment is to peace, security, and a future in which the people of this region can finally live without fear. Pursuant to Article 2, Section 21 of the IPC Constitution, neither the Israeli nor the Palestinian government holds veto authority over this act.
So this is a legislation in which the Israeli and the Palestinian governments are dispensable. We do not give them a veto power. We want to create our own delegation to go to all these countries and to find out what is the real problem. Are we being told the truth about the conflict? And since we are the people of Israel and Palestine suffering from the failure of the governments to give us peace and security, we are taking the initiative to determine for our own what is the best way to make peace, because peace is the best security. Before I go to Avi and Harley. Does anyone have any questions regarding this legislation? Okay. Palestinian parliament members, please vote. Do you vote yes or no on this legislation? Palestinian parliament members, we need 55% of the Palestinian parliament members to approve this legislation. 55% is needed of the Palestinian parliament members. Please publish the vote. 100% of the Palestinian parliament members approve this legislation. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. We need 55% of the Israeli parliament members to approve this legislation. We need 55% of the Israeli parliament members. Please publish the vote. 100% of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. Prime Minister of Israel and President of Palestine, you are not given a veto power because you cannot block us from implementing this legislation. But nevertheless, we would be honored to hear your opinion regarding this legislation. Let's start with Harley.
I wish we had this legislation for the United States. I think this is a very important step forward. I absolutely firmly support this, and I think it has to happen very soon. The crisis that exists right now in the region is there. It can be unraveled and addressed on a number of levels, but it's not being addressed. There's threats, there's profiles, misperceptions. And as I say, I think the United States has a very important role to play with that, as does the United Nations. But I think for the Confederation, this is a very important priority. And one of the main reasons that I agreed to participate in this was the hope that we could have such a positive direction for the future for Israel and Palestine.
But you are stepping out of character. You are the president of Palestine at this time. As the president of Palestine, are you going to give us your blessing, or are you going to oppose what we are doing?
Not at all. I think this is an area where there should be very straightforward deliberations from Palestine and the Israeli leader. And I think it's a matter of survival.
Thank you. Let's go to the Prime Minister of Israel. Mr. Prime Minister of Israel, are you going to give us your blessing to form our own delegations to discuss peace with all these countries and your government, quite frankly?
Thank you. I'm giving you my approval and also my encouragement to start negotiations or even talks with Iran, Lebanon, Yemen, Syria. But there is a big but, a big caveat. It's okay to talk. It's even important to talk, to look for a new path for peace. But we should maintain or keep our principles. I mean, if Iran will suggest to have peace by dismantling the Jewish state, or if Yemen will agree to have peace with Israel on the condition that there will be no Israel as a Jewish state, of course, these talks are in vain, because since the beginning of the conflict, the Arabs, and I'm talking in some kind of generalization, were much open for peace with the Jews, as long as the Jews will not have their own Jewish state. So I think the issue, we should first be happy that Israelis and Palestinians are trying to represent Israel and Palestine to the Arab states and trying to make peace. But the trick is to have peace with a Jewish state, and I'm not sure that the Houthis in Yemen or the people who are controlling Iran right now are really ready to have peace with Israel. So it's important that we have this discussion under the caveat that they must accept Israel as a Jewish state.
Mr. Prime Minister, I don't know what will happen when we go to these countries, but let's assume that they would say, in the constellation of a Jewish state with a federal government, they will be willing to accept Israel as a Jewish state, but would be interested in having a mutual dismantlement of any nuclear possibility on both sides. Would you be open to that?
Yeah, so this is a great question. And again, the issue here is the trust. And not only trust, we need also to take into account the time factor. What do I mean by that? For the long run, to have a world, not to mention Middle East, without nuclear weapons is obviously a good outcome. It's not even an outcome, it should be our aspiration. Yes? We should aspire to this. But obviously, if you think about the history of the Jews in the world and the history of the Jews in the Middle East, and if you take into account that eventually the Jews are a very small minority in this region, although Israel as a state is very strong, even some kind of regional superpower, in terms of number, the Jews are a small minority suffering with great or big traumas with respect to the history of the Jews. I think that to ask Israel to dismantle its nuclear facilities is something that we should not start a negotiation with. I mean, let's say if in the next 20 years we would be able to see that, yes, the Iranians really gave up on their nuclear enterprises, and the Houthis and the Syrians and the Lebanese are really ready to accept not only Israel as a state, but to accept Jews as tourists and vice versa, to come and visit Israel, or to make it short, if I will be able to see that there is a true peace between the peoples, not only between the leaders, then yes, why not? We need a nuclear weapon only for deterrence or for protection. So if I will be sure that it's not needed anymore, it can be a dream come true to have a world or a Middle East without nuclear facilities. But we need to have a substantial time in order to be safe. So let's say if you are talking about having peace for the next 20 years and then asking Israel, like all of the other players, to give up on their nuclear facilities or ambitions, then why not? But we must have this 20 years of trust before that.
All right.
So the Prime Minister of Israel just admitted that Israel has nuclear weapons, for the record.
Yeah, but it's only because I'm still not the Prime Minister of Israel.
Yeah, but you're the Prime Minister now, so you just admitted it. So
you know how should I say it? According to foreign press, we have it.
all right, let's go to the next.
Could I add something to that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
Are you as the president of Palestine?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think what Avi said is the key is this question of how do you build trust? And there's been so much of a cycle of violence where, do you go back to 48? Do you go back to 67? Do you go back to 73? Lebanon in 82? There's been such a cycle there that it's hard to see how you could build trust. But this is where I think one of the things that is most crucial is, are there common interests that can be addressed? And this is one of the reasons I'm so committed to the idea of great infrastructure projects, transportation, energy, water, that would affect the whole region. And that if there were an effort to address this, to have this part of a peace process, so that you would have Palestinians and Israelis working together with other countries in these projects. And I think this was the one breakthrough that's been overlooked of the Oslo process, was the economic annexes, which were largely the result of Shimon Peres and Yossi Beilin, to look at the question, for example, of water, desalination. And we see this as an issue for the whole region, especially recently with the threats to blow up the desalination plant. So I think you can build trust by having mutually beneficial projects that would serve the interests of all people in the region. And I think Israel is well suited to do that based on technological capacity and so on. But this is a step, what the Chinese might call win-win, so that you have joint efforts that benefit all people.
Avi?
I absolutely agree with the Prime Minister of Palestine, because I think that if we want to build trust, and I also agree that this is maybe one of the most important component of true peace, we shouldn't start with Israel should dismantle its military power or nuclear power if she has it. Yeah, I think that the Israelis would look at this demand as something very suspicious. Yeah, because in the eyes of the Israelis, even though in the eyes of many other in the world, Israel is Goliath, and the Palestinians or the Arabs are David, in the eyes of the Israelis, we are David. We are the small player here. So if we want to build trust, we shouldn't start with asking Israel to give up on its nuclear or even military power. Yeah, we should start with suggestions for shared technological or other projects that will really bring together Israelis, Palestinians, and Arabs, and this will be the bridge for peace, not the demands.
By the way, when we conduct our simulations, we discuss many joint projects, including a joint economic zone between Israel and Gaza, between Jerusalem and the West Bank, in Ramallah, Kalandia. This is just a sample of what we are doing, as to suggest. So thank you so much. Let's go to the next simulation, to the next legislation.
Just,
there may be more.
Mr. President, can I just add one little footnote to that?
Yeah, please.
I think this is something that was overlooked in the Oslo process, was that this was the intention of Prime Minister Rabin, and it had support in whole sections of the Arab world. The problem was the opposition inside Israel, as well as the opposition from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. And so this is where, if we would have a unified position from the Israel-Palestine Confederation, and then took that as the basis for peace, and I agree with Avi, start with the economic development joint projects to build the trust, and then everything else will be able to be moved from there.
By the way, this is what President Sadat said when he was asked, how could you achieve peace with Begin, with Israel? He said, once we fixed the main problem, which was trust and psychological issues, which are, according to Saadat, were 70% of the problem to achieve peace, it was very easy to get it.
Since the word trust has been shown up in this discussion, just want to emphasize that the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation is not about trust. It's about transparency. We are about a constitution, and the constitution provides transparency that would lead to trust. But transparency is more important than anything else, because it provides a system where everyone can verify that the other person is working based on the Constitution. Nasir, can you read the next legislation, the future of Gaza?
Sure. And when we go through our discussion period, I would like to pose something, because Avi is, we'll talk about that during our discussion period, some things that he touched on. So future governance of Gaza introduction. The Gaza region, with a population of 2.3 million people, elected 44 members to parliament. Legislation. 1. The destinies of the Israeli and Palestinian people are inseparably linked. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation provides a democratic vision for stability, prosperity, and peace. The IPC declares an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. We are demanding that the Israeli and Palestinian governments to abide by the ceasefire agreement. In addition, prior to the construction campaign, the Israeli troops will withdraw from Gaza. The IPC shall launch a national reconstruction campaign to rebuild homes, roads, hospitals, civic institutions, and critical infrastructure, enabling the prompt return of displaced residents of Gaza to their communities. The IPC proclaims the restoration of law, order, and civil society as a national priority, recognizing that peace is impossible without justice and stability, financial stability,
and social stability.
Social stability. Okay, there you go. Number 5 is the IPC shall retain authority over the Gaza Strip until a new, freely and fairly elected Palestinian government assumes power in Gaza. In accordance with democratic principles, the Palestinian Authority and Hamas shall agree to hold an election within a year for the creation of a Palestinian government. All legislative, executive, and judicial decisions related to Gaza shall be enacted by the IPC government pursuant to the IPC Constitution in cooperation with the government of the United States, the Arab states in the region, and the government of Israel and Palestine. IPC calls upon the international community, including the government of Israel and Palestine, to provide a $50 billion grant to fund this urgent reconstruction and reconciliation effort. Pursuant to Article 2, Section 21 of the IPC Constitution, the Israeli and the Palestinian government are granted veto power over this act.
All right, so we are the only legitimate government in Israel-Palestine. We have a population in Gaza that elected 44 members to the parliament. So out of the 300 parliament members, 44 are from Gaza. So right now, we are the only legitimate government that includes Gaza. We are proposing that the Palestinians will conduct an election and elect a government that would be also responsible for Gaza, together with us. But until then, we are asking for an immediate ceasefire. We are asking for the Israeli troops to withdraw from Gaza. And we are asking for the international community to help us collect $50 billion to rebuild Gaza. And we are giving the Israeli and the Palestinian government a veto power over this legislation because they are indispensable.
Why is it indispensable to Israel if it's an election for Gaza and governments of Gaza and Palestinian territory? So if, for example,
because they are required to remove their troops from Gaza. If we do not give them a veto power, they will ignore us and will will not remove their troops, will not play ball. We need to have them participate. Any other questions before I go to Harley and Avi? Any other questions regarding this legislation? Okay, let's have the Palestinian parliament members. We need 55% of the Palestinian parliament members to accept this legislation. Palestinian parliament members, please vote. We need 55% of the Palestinian parliament members publish the vote. All Palestinian parliament members, 100% voted yes. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Israeli parliament members, please vote on this legislation. We need 55% of the Israeli parliament members to vote yes on this legislation. 5 more seconds to vote. Okay, publish the vote. Also 100% of the Palestinian parliament members. So that means all parliament members from Gaza voted yes on this legislation. All the Palestinian parliament members and all the Israeli parliament members voted yes on this legislation. Let's go to the president of Palestine. Mr. President of Palestine, are you going to veto this legislation?
I'm not going to veto it at all, but I think it gets to a deeper question, which is whether Gaza will be an area which will be where there'll be a restriction to Jewish settlement in Gaza, given that this was one of the big concerns for the present Israeli government. If you have a settlers movement which is insisting on capturing some of Gaza, or if you have on the other side,
Mr. President, that's not part of this legislation. We are asking for Israeli troops. We are the only government in Gaza, and we are giving the Palestinian, your government, quite frankly, you need to run an election for a democratic government. What has that got to do with the Israeli settlers?
Well, I certainly agree with and support, because that's something that's been absent. But I think that's this question for the Palestinians, or the sense that they will have a say, and I guess this does give a say to the Palestinian voters in Gaza. So I remove my objection.
From what I understand, Mr. President, you are running an election coming up, I think in several months. Are you not?
Yes.
Okay. And are you giving the people of Gaza the right to vote?
Absolutely.
Okay. So you shouldn't, I mean, you're not vetoing it, and you shouldn't be vetoing it, and we're looking for your cooperation. Let's go to the Prime Minister of Israel. Mr. Prime Minister, are you going to veto this legislation?
Sorry, I need to clarify one thing before taking a decision. I'm wholeheartedly support an election in Gaza and disengagement from Gaza. But again, on the condition that Hamas will not continue to act like a military power within Gaza. I mean, it's absolutely fine that Hamas will take part in the election as a movement, as a party. But if Hamas is holding the ability to resist to the other Palestinians or to resist to Israel by military force, then we have a problem. Because if we want to prosper Gaza, Gaza should take responsibility, the Gazans should take responsibility on themselves, and we cannot allow a situation in which, on the one hand, we have negotiations, On the other hand, there is Hamas that if something is getting wrong, they can attack Israel as a separate entity or group within Gaza. So my question is, what's about Hamas as a military force?
This legislation does not speak about Hamas in specifically. What if we added a clause that says that all military powers in the Gaza Strip should remove their remove their arms from from Gaza? Would that be acceptable?
Of course. Then I have no reservation. I completely agree with this move.
Okay, so let me.
But I think what's going to happen is there may be an issue because if you have right now in Gaza, there's no security. So if removing them might create a problem for Palestinians because what will happen is gangs will start to take over. I would say if you're going to add that to this legislation, it's a good idea, but I would put something in that there has to be a multinational force that's going to go in and just kind of like make stability. Maybe the Egyptians or the Palestinian Authority until the Palestinian force is until basically that you have a national Palestinian force that can go take over. Because if you withdraw right now, you're going to have, gangsters and mobs basically take over.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think that the Gazans should take responsibility upon themselves, and that's mean that they should have their own police or military force. I just don't want Hamas to have it. If it's the Palestinians or international,
the problem, Avi, now is, and I hate to admit this, but Hamas is the only one right now that's able to maintain order. Unfortunately, in Gaza, if you have no Hamas, you're going to have gangs take over because the Palestinian Authority does not have the power to take over. So this is the reason why Palestinians in Gaza are saying that, maybe we don't like Hamas or want them, but they are the ones who are keeping the streets safe. And this
It
is,
seems to me this is something that's up to the Palestinian government to address.
Yes, the Palestinian government could address it, but we're saying temporarily right now, we have to have a multinational force that will go in there to maintain order while this is being done. Temporary. So in addition to the IPC, we need some kind of police force that's going to maintain order and protect people.
And it is a little
Okay,
strange.
so this is what I added. All military weapons shall be removed from Gaza by all entities. The IPC will negotiate for an international force to provide order and safety for the region. Would that be acceptable to you, Mr. Prime Minister of Israel?
yes.
And what about for the President of Palestine?
But you're saying all entities. When you say all entities, that includes the Palestinian police, the Palestinian entity itself.
Correct.
No.
All entities. That includes the Israeli entity, the Palestinian entities. None will have any weapons in Gaza.
So how do you have a place where 2 million people live with no force that's going to implement security for them with no weapons? It's not
There's going to be an international force. We are going to bring an international force to the area.
Do the same to Israel.
You have to allow for the Palestinians themselves to develop a police force that will be able to follow the Constitution.
How about dismantling the IDF?
No, this is a joke.
It is being removed from Gaza. It is being removed from. We are speaking about Gaza.
Yeah, but
we cannot dismantle the IDF because the IDF, as you can see, if you're looking at the news, has a lot of problems with Iran, with Hezbollah. So yes, when the Messiah will come, I will be happy to dismantle the IDF. But it's not serious. What
No, it
I'm
is
trying
not.
to
Okay,
It is not.
No, no.
It is not.
we are
No,
speaking about Gaza right now.
but it is not
Yeah,
serious to ask the Hamas to dismantle right now without any
what?
protection.
No, I can't believe that you
There
are
is an
talking like,
international force.
yeah, this is what I want to say. I'm not against the idea that the Palestinian Authority will have their own police force there. I'm supporting the idea of Arab police force there. They cannot govern Gaza. Nobody can govern Gaza without having power. Yeah, but I think that it can be crazy to think after October 7th that Hamas will do the job. Yeah.
It's something to discuss later.
But Hamas
Okay.
Hamas may not be willing to give power to the PA. So,
But they've already agreed to that. The question is the transition. And I understand Avi's concern, and I would agree with it. But the concern is the transitionary period, and that you cannot just say that we were going to hand it over to a multinational force permanently. I mean, Palestinians do not want to be occupied permanently by the Egyptians, for example, or the Israelis. So a temporary international force, and I would even go so far as saying we need an international force in the West Bank to fight against these fascists that are running around terrorizing us. But the point is that it has to be done sort of in that transitionary type of period, and that it will eventually turn into a Palestinian, basically an organic Palestinian force. So if we were, for example, to say like no militias, like we don't want different parties to have their militias. We need an army or a security force that's representative of the elected government. Do you understand how I'm saying? So coming from
Yeah.
there, yeah.
So we are on the same page on this.
Yes.
Let's agree that we don't want to see any Palestinian militias, but we are ready to accept Palestinian force working according to the law.
Yeah.
And
This is absolutely fine.
one that comes out of this confederation process that's governed by the laws that are drafted by the new government, the confederation.
all right, so this is what was added to the legislation. All military weapons shall be removed from Gaza by all entities. During the transition period, a police force will continue to function in Gaza. The IPC will negotiate for an international force to provide order and safety for the region. Is that acceptable to you, Mr. Prime Minister of Israel?
Yes.
What about for the President of Palestine?
Yes, it is. I think we have to make sure there's, and when we actually establish it, that there's a time frame for the transition away from that to
I
remove
think
the
it's
international
1
force.
year. I think the legislation provides for 1 year.
Okay.
All right,
Maybe more than that.
let's have the Palestinian parliament members please vote on this amended legislation. Palestinian parliament members, please vote. We already have the approval of the President of Palestine and the Prime Minister of Israel to this legislation. Okay, publish the vote. We need 55% of the Palestinian parliament members. We got 89%. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Please vote. Israeli parliament members. We need 55% of the Israeli parliament members. 5 more seconds for the Israeli parliament members to vote. Publish the vote. We got 83% of the Israeli parliament members, so congratulations. This legislation has passed, and the veto has not been exercised.
In the future, I wrote I wrote in the chat a better wording. I think that would be more suitable. So if we want to use that in the future, I think it's more clear.
Okay, send it to me.
Okay, I'll send it to you by email as well.
Okay. After participating in the simulation, do you support a common federal government for the people of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza? Please vote yes or no. Last time we had one person voting no. Let's see if we made a change. Please vote yes or no. If you still don't know what it is, then vote no. But if you participated, I think you should know what it is. 5 more seconds to vote. And Harley and Avi, you can vote as well now. You're out of character at this time. Harley and Avi, you can vote.
All right. Now I'm voting.
Okay, good. All right. And the polling, 100% of the people who voted yes. We didn't have that person who voted no. I don't know if he left or changed his mind. That would be interesting. If you are the one who changed your mind, please let us know. Whoever you are, if you want to talk about why you changed your mind.
He left.
He left. Okay.
The question is why? Because he changed his mind or not?
No, actually, he left because he wrote some comments that were very not nice, and he had to go. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's go to open discussion, and I'll have Nasir conduct the open discussion. You can ask both Harley and Avi questions, and get their impression of.
Sure. So before we go, we're going to go to the questions. If you guys want to, if you're not able to speak, you guys can put it in the chat box. I am monitoring the chat box, and we'll be able to relay the questions to the presenters and the guests. And to start, I wanted to, before we go to Shlomo, I'm going to go before you, Shlomo, if you don't mind. But Avi, thank you for your participation. Appreciate it. And some of the views that you expressed, I definitely feel like they come, from a very concerned place. However, your emphasis on the Jewish trauma and on the, for example, when you emphasize that we don't want to give up nuclear weapons now, okay, take 20 years and stuff. Now, I'm going to flip it for you. The problem that I have with this is that Israelis, in my opinion, I'm Palestinian from Jerusalem, and I noticed that Israelis are very spoiled because we have something right now in Gaza called a ceasefire. Now, it's a ceasefire in which almost 1,000 Palestinians have been killed since it was declared. Now, if it was called a ceasefire and 1,000 Israeli citizens, civilians were killed, we would not be calling it a ceasefire. We have something in Lebanon right now before the escalation that was called a ceasefire, where over 1,000 Israeli attacks. And the problem with this posing is that when we have this periods of let's wait and wait things to get better, since Oslo, we have played this game. And Palestinians are very frustrated because it seems to be that Israelis are okay talking peace as long as they're not the ones being tired or being killed or being attacked. It's always, we can talk peace while Palestinians are killed, while Palestinians are murdered, but we can't talk peace. We had 3 months of bus bombings in 2001, and it brought Oslo to a total collapse. Meanwhile, we had an intifada where 2,500 Palestinians were killed, but we are still talking about peace and moving forward. So this overemphasis on Jewish trauma that neglects Palestinian equality in terms of life, the value of life and suffering, is an obstacle that's in the mentality of too many Israelis, including those who are very leftist and liberals and so-called. Do you see the problem with that?
Well, first of all, yes. And obviously, it would have been much easier for me to look at this, to look at this situation through your eyes, as I were a Palestinian, but I'm Jewish and Israeli. So still, I understand your point, and still I think that the situation in Gaza is awful. And I absolutely agree with you that we need to fix it very soon. But I think that you are ignoring several important facts. And I will reply only with respect to the second intifada. So yes, you can say something like 3 months of suicide bombers caused to the Oslo Accord to collapse and to Israel to retaliate with a severe and aggressive military force for 3 years. Yeah, okay, we can look at it this way. But on the other hand, the second Intifada, in the eyes of the Israelis, erupted immediately after Israel suggested a Palestinian state to Yasser Arafat. Yeah? So in the eyes of the Israelis, it was like an act of betrayal. So you cannot compare 3 months to 3 years or who killed more. The issue is why immediately in the middle of the negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians, not in the middle, in the prime of the negotiations, after Israel for the first time suggested a Palestinian state, and I agree with you, it was not the best offer. Maybe the Palestinian were in need to get a bigger Palestinian state. But still, to react with violence to an offer of peace, this is something that only increased the Jewish trauma and distrust.
But don't you think that these were acts that were
By the way,
purposely
Nassar, by the way, it's also true with respect to what's going on in Gaza right now, because it's really heartbreaking to see what is going on in Gaza. And I know that I'm not representing the vast majority of the Israelis in my feeling toward Gaza, but I do represent the vast majority of the Israelis in their will not to harm Gaza and to live in peace. So if you think about who started this last escalation, October 7th, who started the mass murder and rapes and etc., so this is the main question. Okay, so we can agree that the Israeli response was very, very aggressive, to put it mildly. But you cannot ignore the fact that Hamas started this cycle
This is
of
not
last war.
true. This
Yeah,
is
see-
absolutely not true.
so
This is
No,
absolutely
not-
not true. It didn't start October 7th. Come on. It
It was
started in
before
48,
October
then
7th.
67, then 20 years, almost 20 years of starvation of Gaza. Gaza is a concentration camp. Everybody knew it, except for the Israelis. The Israelis know nothing because of the media in Israel is hiding
No.
and lying, I mean, continually. And even now, this is a huge lie. The whole October, how October 7? Excuse me. They were starving. There was a UN report already in 2012 predicting that by 2020, Gaza will not be livable. And
I agree. I agree with Shilon.
So I think Shlomo is having an internet connection issue.
I think that, you know, this kind of discussion, whether if you agree with Shlomo or not, it's not conducive, to start and say that Gaza was starving before. You can also say that if the Gazan would have prospered Gaza,
yeah, there
the
was.
situation would have been different. But let's leave it aside. Let's move forward.
Yeah, but the problem is you're doing what many in the right in Israel do. You're jumping to sound bites and straw manning the situation about some other things. Now, for example, I can counter you. I'm not going to say anything about October 7th as far as what Hamas did, but I'm going to propose something else to you. Why was it that on October 7th, the state of Israel had 767 soldiers protecting 56 kilometers of border with an enemy that's openly hostile to you? Meanwhile, you have thousands of soldiers protecting settlers in the center of Hebron, for example. So if you want to blame anybody for October 7th, you can blame Hamas, but you have to blame your government that has prospered and basically allowed Hamas to facilitate and exist and even open the path for them to receive funding and have benefited from the separation of Gaza and the West Bank. This is a powder cake that blew up because you guys allowed it to blow up. Israel did that. And they need to take responsibility for it. And who's taking responsibility for it now? The hundreds of thousands of dead Palestinians. Israelis are paying a very small price for this mistake.
No, first of all, it's not a small price. Each and every one is like, the saying in Hebrew, Kol Adam hu olam umlo'o. Each and every person, it's like the entire world. So the Israelis didn't pay a small price, just like the Gazans didn't pay a small price. But I'm saying something differently. I agree with you. I think that the Israeli policy, is I think, let me put it this way. I think that there was a context to October 7th, and the context is that the conflict was not resolved. And Israel, under the right-wing government, did almost everything not to resolve it. I agree with you. I just think that just like David Ben-Gurion, when he established Israel, he knew how to fight the Irgun led by Begin. He knew how to fight the Stern Gang. He knew how to build and prosper the Jewish Yishuv. And I think that if we want to see a change, we need both sides to take responsibility. I mean, for me, it's astonishing that the Israelis are not looking at the future of Gaza with the aim to prosper it, to free it. But at the same token, it's astonishing to see that no one in Gaza blaming Hamas and rebelling against Hamas. I think that this is why I was ready and happy to join this project of confederation. I think that both sides should work together. I mean, it's one thing to complain, like Shlomo complained, and with justification, But it's another thing to fix reality. And if you want to fix reality, you need to have in the Palestinians' leadership someone like Ben-Gurion who would be ready to fight Hamas on the one hand, and on the other hand, ready to compromise. And I also think that, yes, in this life, me as a person, I'm sure that you, Nassar, as a person, from time to time, needs to have compromise in its own life. And without starting with this point, everything will be in vain. It will be like the discussion between me and Shlomo is right in a lot of aspects, and I'm right in other aspects. But let's leave it aside. Like Ben-Gurion said, it's important to learn history in order to forget it. Because if you want to move forward, you need to learn how to forget.
May I say something on this?
Sure. Go ahead, Harley.
I think there are 2 points I'd like to make. One is that I don't think people in Israel are aware of the reaction of Jews in the diaspora to what's happened with the Gaza situation, especially young Jews, college student age, and so on. There's been a rejection of the arguments, especially when it comes to Greater Israel. And what I'd like to say is that if there's anything that the IPC can do that would address this, it would be to make the arguments for Greater Israel disappear, defeat the whole idea of Greater Israel, because you can say whatever you want about the period leading up to October 7th and after October 7th, but the idea that exists within the existing leadership, which openly says that the Palestinians are beasts, are not human. That's been said. That's hard to forget. That's where trust comes in. That's where the idea of moving ahead with legislation that would benefit both parties in this. But I think we can't forget that the Greater Israel idea bears a lot of the burden of the loss of hope for the Palestinians in this recent period.
All right, Shlomo, did anybody want to raise their hand, or do you want me to call on Shlomo?
I almost forgot what I wanted to say. so much. No, I agree to go forward. Yeah, let us think about solution. And it's interesting, Avi, that you say that that it is not fair for one state is not fair for the Jews and to the Jewish state. What about fairness to the people who see it? What is not fair about equal rights for everybody in one state? Yeah, it won't be Jewish. And the Jewish state, look at the Jewish state. They're committing genocide. They look at the jails in Israel. 10,000 Palestinians are in these jails being raped and tortured. Excuse me, and you have Smotrich and Ben Gvir with his death penalty and to Palestinians. I mean, what kind of Jewish state you have built, or we have built? What kind is this something to be proud of? Is this something you think solve any problem for the Jews? Maybe it is the other way around. Maybe the Jewish state is a black hole that is going to collapse on itself and take the Jews, all the Jews with it, and maybe the whole world. Maybe that's the Jewish state. So you have to think about it in terms of even future. You cannot talk about future without looking at what the Jewish state has done.
Well, Shlomo, I think that, if we want to think philosophically, the idea of nations is stupid. Yeah, we should live together, all the citizens of the world. I agree with you. Yeah. But, you cannot uproot this idea of nationalism right now, okay? So if the world is divided into nation states, and it's a stupid idea, having a Jewish state is the least stupid idea, because you have a Jewish nation for so many, or Jewish, let's call it Jewish religious community for thousands of years. So, and I agree with you, the current situation is awful. I started at October 7 as much more of middle right perception. And since October, I'm just turning to the left, in contrast to most Israelis. Yeah, absolutely. And my friends are laughing at me that I'm taking the wrong direction. But I agree with you. But this is another issue. We can talk about history, philosophy, etc. If we want to solve the problem, we need to start and accept the idea that for most of the Jews around the world, it's important to have a Jewish state. And if you talk about the problem of the Jews outside of Israel, let's take into account that October 7th also, let's say, unveiled the said, or exposed, the sad fact that Jews are still being hated around the world, yeah? And you can say, okay, it's because of Israel, it's not because of Israel. It's still very weird that people all over the Jews all over the world are being attacked. And it started on October 8th, not after Israel was blamed with accusation of genocide, which, by the way, I totally reject. It was not a genocide. And
no,
by the
it
way,
is a genocide.
No, I will tell you something.
Okay, go ahead.
If it
Go ahead,
if it
Alex.
was a genocide, you can call genocide everything, but then you are just making the term. You are taking the term genocide and making it as a joke. Yeah, because if it was a genocide, Israel could kill much more, and if there was an intention.
So you need to have a big number to call it a genocide, not a particular number. Is that what you're saying?
So
Yes, because the term genocide was meant to point to an intention to eliminate people.
Yeah.
By the way, it was to eliminate the Jews by the Nazis, yeah? And the Israelis had no intent to eliminate the Palestinians. Even when they say Amalek, when they say Amalek.
Yes.
Amalek is a Jewish term that Ben-Gurion refer to begging. Yeah, Amalek is a Jewish term. The Jews throwing on each other when they see such a big evil, and there was no intent to kill or to destroy or to eliminate the Palestinian people.
Okay, but
how can
Avi,
can you say it,
the
Avi?
definition, the legal definition of genocide is more than just killing the people, but also the means of life. And when you have 90% of the infrastructure, access to water, facilities like land, like 90% of the land in Gaza that was used for agriculture can no longer be used. You know, there's something called the Carthaginian peace. When Rome made peace with Carthage, they destroyed, they killed all the men. They made sure that no food and that the women and children would be starved to death. So were they killed by the Romans? No, but conditions were created for them to die. So the purpose, I mean, we have a deliberate plan for Gaza to make it inhabitable. And the other thing interesting about genocide is most cases of genocide are usually ruled after the incident. But there is so much evidence in Gaza because it was basically broadcasted by Israeli soldiers showing us what they were doing and Israeli leaders admitting what their agenda was, that we are now seeing a genocide live rather than having to send an investigation. I mean, if we've had incidents in Bosnia declared a genocide that were not nearly as severe as what happened in Gaza. And it just it's to me it seems that sometimes your views you're saying you switched from center right to the left, but it sounds to me like you're clinging on to these Hasbara views of denial. I mean, you might as well deny, you're sitting here saying this and this. These are elements that you're still maintaining on to holding on to. And I'll focus. I will tell you, I will focus on the future because this confederation idea is something that we talk about in terms of a future solution. And I agree with you. But the problem is when you have an Israeli mentality that sits and, when Abba Ibn said that Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity, well, I'm going to throw it to you because I'm telling you that Israelis always fail to miss an opportunity. Like, for example, Iran. Iran in the last few years was very unpopular in the predominantly Sunni Arab Levant because they were a threat to Lebanon, they were a threat to Syria, and even to Jordan, and even the Palestinian Authority. Now, who's been combating Hamas the most? Is it Israel? No, it's the Palestinian Authority. They have been combating. Jordan has been combating militants who are sponsored by Iran. So rather than Israel jumping in allies in cooperation with these organizations in Iran, but now guess what? Iran looks like the heroes in the region because Iran has showed us that the only way to deal with the United States and Israel is to put a military front. Negotiations take you nowhere because Israelis have never been serious about negotiations. And this is the type of problem that organizations like us, when I turn to Palestinian people and I say, hey, let's do a confederation, let's do something cooperation, I'm a laughingstock. They laugh at me. They're like, yeah, they're going to talk to you for 30 years because why? When you're done, not one neighborhood in Jerusalem will be Palestinian. It'll be one big Israeli settlement. It'll be all Israelis everywhere. And we'll be ethnically cleansed and there'll be nothing to negotiate.
Nassar, the same... I understand your feeling, but I can assure you that the same way that you are talking about the Israelis, Israel is talking about the Palestinians. And I can tell you that if we talked about genocide, so what was October 7th? Killing, murdering, raping, calling Jews pigs. They stopped only because eventually they could not move on. They would have gone on and on and on and on. And moreover, one day after October 7th, Hezbollah started to attack Israel. In the eyes of the Israelis, it was like, if we will not respond in a very aggressive way, they would kill us all. So I am not like that.
That's a propaganda.
Well, I would like.
And what was the previous answer? Not a propaganda?
That's a propaganda.
Avi, you have a problem with information, a very severe one.
Yes, I agree with Shlomo.
For example, you talk about intention for genocide. You have Amalek by Bibi Netanyahu. You have Yoav Gallant saying he's going to prevent water and electricity and all the means of living, meaning he's going to commit genocide. He said
Shlomo, are you in Israel?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so this is a big problem because I was here, I'm still here in Israel during October 7th and most of the days of the war. And when Yoav Gallant said they will get no water, no electricity, he was talking about Hamas. And by the way, Rashid Khalidi said on October 8th, it's going to be a genocide.
Yes,
So
and I
if
said
you're
it too.
assuming,
Genocide,
okay,
wait a minute.
so if you're assuming immediately that it's going to be a genocide,
That's what they are saying.
Yeah,
That's
okay,
what they were
let's
saying, that they are going to make it.
let's
no,
call
Shlomo,
order.
you know, to say Amalek, the original intention, and I'm not talking about right wing, I'm talking about the Israeli government, which I'm opposed, but at the beginning of October 7th, I even though I oppose this government, I was there. So I know that when they said Amalek, they meant to say the biggest crime against humanity. They didn't mean to say we are going to erase the
Oh,
Palestinians.
they said, this is Amalek, and
We're gonna
you have the president.
But
You have the president, Mr. Herzog.
Shlomo, we're gonna
just one word.
Okay,
I'm
Shlomo, when
done.
Trump said we're going to destroy your
we're gonna get
civilization,
to
are you going to
Joseph
be
and then
against
Tina.
all
Tina, I'm
Americans?
gonna get to you right after Joseph.
No, I'm not against all
Okay,
Israelis.
we're gonna go. We're gonna move on.
family
We're gonna
there.
move
Come
on to Joseph and then Tina. Go ahead, Joseph.
I have a question for Avi, and for that matter, also for Harley. Do you think that the Israeli and the Palestinian identity is interconnected with violence? Or do you think they can, if that is the case, can they separate their identity from violence? Or is that part of their identity?
I am optimistic. I think that it's a lot about leadership. I think with other leadership in Israel, and also again among the Palestinians, that will call for a non-violent resistance. I don't understand why the Palestinians needed October 7th instead of going in masses, million people, just going on a strike, sitting next to the border, asking to have peace.
They did
Why
it.
it is so funny?
The Great March. The Great March.
Yeah.
You don't know about the Great
No,
March?
the
And what
great-
was the
the
response?
great-
What was the
No.
response? How many
No.
Israelis died during the Great March?
Yeah.
I
How about?
don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
2018.
I don't know, but believe me, if you know Israeli history or if you know the history of the
Unfortunately,
conflict,
too well.
okay. So in many cases, Arab intellectuals said during the 50s, during the 60s, during the 70s, we don't need to fight. We just need to march into Israel and to throw them to the sea. So when you are talking about the Great March, okay, from your point of view, it was the move in order to project our will to have peace. But in the eyes of the Israelis, and they had historical proof to it was a threat. So I'm not talking about marching to the border. I'm talking about having a big strike, calling for two-state solution, calling for, reshaping the Palestinian Authority and reshaping Israel. Not talking about victimhood, talking about how can we shape the future. And I promise you, as an Israeli who wants peace, and I'm ready to divide the land, of course, that for the vast majority of the Israelis, this is what they cannot see, a real quest for peace. Now you can tell me as a Palestinian,
This is not true.
believe me, this is true, unfortunately.
No.
Shlomo, you are not living in Israel.
Shlomo, let me Tina, let's give Tina, she's been patiently waiting.
I'm going to have to leave soon.
Sure, go ahead, Tina. Sorry we took too long.
I just want to say that Israel was created for a safe environment for Jewish people for good reason. But today, Jews live safer in Russia, China, Iran, and the United States and other countries around the world than they live in Israel. Jews are more in danger in Israel than any other place on earth. I don't know what that means to anybody else, but thank you very much for letting me say my piece before I go.
Joseph asked me if I would make a comment.
Sure. Go ahead. Thank you, Tina. Go ahead, Harley.
I think the question here is there's no resolution if you're going to start from October 7th.
Yeah.
And the idea of the IPC is how do we move beyond that? But I think there's another point here that is missed by most people in terms of history, which is that it was not just the question of the persecuted Jews from Eastern Europe needing a place to move to. There was an intent in the British Empire to create this kind of confrontation, this kind of unsolvable paradox. And this had to do with if you read Balfour's personal notes, he saw the creation of the State of Israel as a way to give more influence to the British to protect against Russian movement into the region, the German movement into the region. And in a sense, it was a setup from the beginning. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is that if you want to look at an original sin, the original sin goes back before October 7th. It goes back before 1948. And it goes back to the fact that there was desperation given the pogroms and the treatment of Jews in Eastern Europe and Russia. I mean, my family came from mostly Poland, and they had a choice of going to Israel or to New York. And they went to New York, as did large numbers of Eastern European Jews. The most desperate ended up in Israel as, I would say, pawns in a game of the British Empire.
Yeah.
This is why you need, from the outside, a capability to say, look, this is not about the blame of this group or that group. Let's move beyond. And what attracted me to this idea of the IPC is the possibility that there could be a granting of justice to both Israelis and to Palestinians through a legislative process to create a better future without rehashing all the legitimate complaints about the past. And I think that's what Avi intends to also.
I think that was an important part of it, but at the same time, there are certain things that have to be sort of parameters. We have to have certain parameters to sit and to say that Avi's tone, and I don't know if he's implying this or not, but it's almost as if the Palestinians failed because they are not making it clear that they want a two-state solution. Even though I can sit here and give you lists of names and leaders, that are governments of people like Salam Fayyad. If you know Salam Fayyad, and I'm sure you know of him.
Yes.
Why did he quit? He quit because no matter, you will not find a more pragmatic and moderate leader than Salam Fayyad. And most of the people that are running the Palestinian Authority. What more do you want? Someone to, literally just bend over? What? But the point is that these people look like idiots. And the reason why they look like idiots is because no matter what they did. So this whole notion that Palestinians should have marched to the street to demand a two-state solution. In fact, even today, if you take the polls among Palestinians today, more than, and I think in Gaza it was like 74%. Even today, after everything they faced, Palestinian support for a two-state solution, which is basically peace with Israel, is much more popular than it is in Israel itself. So I think you're out of touch with Palestinian attitudes, to be honest with you.
First of all, Nassar, we are closing to conclude this discussion. I will be happy to talk with you further, outside of this group. But,
sure.
Talking about Salam Fayyad, it's like I will talk with you about Yossi Beilin. Salam Fayyad was not a leader that the Israelis or even the Palestinians are taking too seriously. And more than that, you said that those Palestinians who supported the two-state solution are looking like idiots. And Hamas, they are not idiots. And by the way, I hope that you are saying that you have the right data about the support for two-state solution, and you are correct that unfortunately in the Israeli society of now, the support for two-state solution is on the decline, to put it mildly. But from what I heard, most of the people in Gaza, even after October 7, even after the destruction of Gaza, they still support Hamas. So when Israel is
I don't agree with that. There's so much evidence and so much polls.
Well,
I don't know where you're getting your information from.
Okay, let's
I hope you're right.
try to conclude.
In fact, I would say that in Gaza, Hamas is probably less popular than it is anywhere in the world. They're more popular in the Arab world, in the Islamic world, than they are in Gaza. And in West Bank, they're more popular, but not as popular as outside, because pro-Palestinian people that don't live in Palestine are more supportive of Hamas than Palestinians are that live in the territories.
I think just to conclude that had we start our conversation with this statement,
Yes.
most Palestinians are against Hamas, it would have been easier to convince Israelis.
What's wrong with Hamas? Hamas.
All right,
Shlomo.
Okay,
Shlomo,
let's conclude this meeting. I want to thank Harley and Avi for your generosity in coming to this meeting and discussing an idea that we all, I think we all support. I want to thank you for your time and your generosity. It's been great to have you, and we will continue. Just want to tell you that we are actually working on creating this election, and hopefully in about 4 months, Palestinians and Israelis will be able to start registering for this federal government. Thank you so much.
Joseph.
Thank you.
Joseph.
I learned a lot.
You said
and
this.
Yes.
Sorry, Joseph. You said about getting a donation from a third party to push forward this movement that we have. Can you? Because I read it about on the email message that the IPC is getting donation from some form of
we received $100,000 from a person who wants to be anonymous, and we are working with a
third party.
I'm sorry?
No, you mean a third party. Sorry.
Yeah, we received $100,000, and but it's going to be. We will need a lot more than that to conduct the election. We are in contact with an election company in Europe, and they are working with an American company, a mapping company, because the mapping company is the company that is going to create the districts. The election company is going to create the election. We will have, hopefully we will have it ready in about 4 months. Palestinians and Israelis will be able to register to vote, and will be able to register to run. And hopefully everything that you saw in the simulation, in the assumptions, would become a reality in about a year and I think 15 months from now.
So that's good. It's moving forward. Like our progress is getting better. Okay.
All right. Avi, you want to make a concluding remark?
Yes, I just want to say that my family origins are from Iraq, from Baghdad, and I love the Arab culture, and I'm really think that these kinds of exchange between me and Palestinians, even when they are heated, are important, and we are doing something important. And hopefully, after this awful period, we will start a new one. But we should start it with optimism, without victimization, and with, ability to forget. So, salamu alaikum, shalom, nitraot.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Avi.
Bye-bye.
Harley,
Bye-bye.
you want to make a concluding remark?
Yes, I was very happy to hear what Avi just said. Look, what my organization has been doing since the mid-'80s is looking for an economic basis for peace. And we need this because the world today is moving more rapidly into confrontation And you have the handful of billionaires who are profiting from these wars. And the vast majority of the population wants peace and would be willing to work together. And there are no real viable options out there because of the control of the media. So I thank you, Joseph, for this opportunity to speak to this.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
I
both.
would encourage people to look at the schillerinstitute.com website for the information about the Oasis Project, which is now expanded to include the whole Middle East, North Africa, and into the Afghanistan. Water desalination as a basis for creating a sustainable development for peace.
What's the name of the organization again?
Schiller Institute.
The
Friedrich
Schiller Institute.
the German poet, Schiller.
All right. Okay. Thank you all so much. And
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks,
all right.
guys.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
See you.
I think I knocked him out, Nasir.
What is it?
I knocked him out asking what's wrong with Hamas.
Yeah,
But
you know,
anyway.
it was interesting because hold on, let's do